Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be going back in time a little bit,
Okay.
to 1978 to be exact.
Right.
And it was a time of, you know, platform shoes and disco balls,
Yeah.
but also a time of, a lot of social and political change happening.
Right.
And our destination this time is Salt Lake City, Utah,
Okay.
where a young man named Anthony Tony Adams was brutally murdered just a few days before a pretty crucial election.
Wow.
And his case, it remains unsolved to this day.
Really?
Yeah. And it's left, a lot of unanswered questions.
Right.
And really a whole community grappling with, this weight of injustice.
Oh, wow. That's heavy.
Yeah.
So what makes Tony's story so compelling is that he wasn't just,
Right.
a victim of a violent crime. He
Right.
was a trailblazer.
Yeah.
I mean, he was 25 years old, openly gay, black socialist,
Wow.
managing a congressional campaign in a city that was known for being really conservative.
Yeah, that's a lot for one person.
Imagine the courage it took
Yeah.
to live so openly and to challenge the status quo
Right.
in a time when those identities could literally make you a target.
It's really hard to fathom the kind of pressure he must have faced,
I know.
especially in Salt Lake City in 1978.
Yeah.
So let's try to set the scene a little bit here.
Okay.
So we've got police reports, court documents,
Mm-hmm.
interviews with people who knew Tony,
Yeah.
and even some really great insights from a gay historian who lived through that whole tumultuous period.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
So you have to remember being openly gay in that time and place
Right.
was really difficult.
I bet.
There were no legal protections against discrimination.
Wow.
And a lot of times law enforcement viewed the LGBTQ plus community with, suspicion,
Yeah.
hostility even.
Yeah, I can see that. And we actually have, some really fascinating insights from
Right.
Ben Williams, who is a gay historian who lived in Salt Lake City back then.
Oh, wow.
And he paints a really vivid picture of the fear and isolation that a lot of people felt back then.
Yeah.
Forced to live these double lives
Mm-hmm.
and constantly, looking over their shoulders.
Yeah, for sure. And, he even drew some parallels to the assassination of Harvey Milk.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
The first openly gay
Hmm.
elected official in California,
Right.
which happened just a few months before Tony's murder.
Yeah, that's right.
And that event sent shockwaves,
Yeah. Oh,
through the LGBTQ plus community nationwide.
definitely.
And it really just amplified that feeling of,
Vulnerability.
vulnerability, fear. Yeah.
Fear, yeah.
So here's Tony, navigating this very challenging social and political landscape.
Right.
And he was actively involved in the Socialist Workers' Party,
Mm-hmm.
which was a group that often, clashed with authorities.
I see.
And he was known for organizing protests, writing letters to the editor,
Wow.
really, pushing the boundaries of what was considered acceptable at the time.
So then what happened?
So then, on October 25th, 1978,
Okay.
Tony is found murdered in his apartment. And the scene was described as chaotic.
Really?
There was a bloody butcher knife,
Mm-hmm.
sign of a struggle, and some cash was missing,
Okay.
which made it look like initially maybe a robbery gone wrong.
Right. Right.
But something doesn't quite add up.
What do you mean?
Like, why would a robber, go to such extremes?
Yes.
Stabbing him multiple times and cutting his throat.
Right.
Especially if, as some reports suggest, he might have even been in the bathroom when the intruder entered.
Oh, wow.
It seems like the brutality suggests a much more personal motive,
Right.
possibly fueled by, rage or hatred.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
The level of violence seems to go beyond what you typically see in a random robbery.
exactly.
It makes you wonder, was this a crime of passion, a targeted attack, or something else entirely?
And that's where the investigation takes a couple interesting turns.
Okay.
So initially, the police are exploring several angles,
Mm-hmm.
including a possible link to another murder that happened in the same apartment complex a year prior. And even a recent argument that Tony had had with a woman described as a lady friend. But the leads dry up pretty quickly.
Really?
Yeah, and the case starts to stall.
Oh, no.
And that's when the Socialist Workers' Party,
Okay.
of which Tony was a member,
Right.
they step in and they start openly criticizing the police,
Oh, wow.
accusing them of not taking the case seriously because of Tony's political beliefs and his sexual orientation.
They thought it was because he was gay.
Yeah, and a socialist.
Wow.
And they claim that the police were more interested in harassing and intimidating the party
Oh, gosh.
than actually finding Tony's killer.
Wow.
And then things escalate even further when the police demand a list of party members.
Really?
Yeah, and they refused to share a suspect photo with the party,
Wow.
citing confidentiality concerns.
Oh my gosh.
So it really creates this whole climate of distrust and suspicion.
Oh yeah, I bet.
And the party really saw the police's actions as, a blatant attempt to silence them
Right.
and disrupt their activism.
It really sounds like a standoff.
It was almost like a standoff
Yeah.
between these two opposing forces,
Right.
each with their own agenda and perspective on the case.
Right. And we'll be right back after the break. And this already tense situation, it gets even more complicated just weeks after Tony's murder.
Oh, no.
Another gay man, Doug Coleman, is found murdered in Salt Lake City.
Oh, my gosh.
And the similarities between the cases, particularly the brutality of the attacks,
Right.
they start to raise fears that maybe a serial killer is targeting the LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah, you can imagine the fear that gripped the community.
Totally.
It's like every shadow held a potential threat.
Right.
And this was a time when being openly gay often meant putting yourself at risk.
Absolutely. Now, to make this already complex narrative even more complex,
Okay.
we uncover a pretty unsettling detail about Tony's past.
What's that?
A few months before his murder, he was arrested for solicitation.
Solicitation. What do you mean?
So according to police reports, they found Tony's number on a bathroom wall
Uh-huh.
and set up a sting operation.
Wow.
They posed as someone interested in sex,
Oh, God.
and then they arrested Tony,
Wow.
but he maintained his innocence.
So was this a legitimate arrest, or was there something else going on?
Well, that's the question.
Yeah.
The Socialist Workers' Party,
Mm-hmm.
they claimed it was a setup,
Really?
a way for the police to entrap Tony and pressure him to become an informant.
To spy on the party?
Yeah, they believed the police were trying to infiltrate the party and disrupt their activities.
Wow, that's a serious accusation.
Yeah.
Did they have any evidence to support that claim?
It's tough to say for sure.
Okay.
What we do know is that the charges against Tony were mysteriously dropped just days before his murder.
That's really strange.
Yeah, it raises all sorts of questions about the police's motives and their relationship with Tony.
Right, like was this a genuine attempt to enforce the law?
Right.
Or there's something more sinister at play?
Exactly.
It's like a tangled web of suspicion and unanswered questions.
Totally.
So we have this young man fighting for social justice.
Right.
Seems like he was targeted by the police
Yeah.
and then brutally murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And the police investigation just hits a dead end.
Yeah.
What happens next?
So for decades, Tony's case remained cold,
Wow.
shrouded in all this mystery and speculation.
Right.
But then in 2010, a glimmer of hope emerges.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a fingerprint from the crime scene is finally matched
Oh, wow. And who was it matched to?
to a woman named Mickey Henson.
A woman.
Yeah.
And what do you mean the fingerprint was matched decades later?
Well, it seems like there were some issues with how the evidence was handled back then. But the real twist is that Mickey Henson died in 2004.
So she was already dead.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So who was she?
Right.
And how is she connected to Tony?
Yeah, like dead men tell no tales.
Right.
But in this case, it seems like a dead woman might hold the key to solving this whole cold case.
That's so interesting.
So we start digging into Mickey Henson's background.
Okay.
And we find out she had a really complex and troubled past.
Really?
Yeah, she ran away from home at 11,
Wow.
got involved with drugs and robbery,
Mm-hmm.
and she had a reputation for violence and even prejudice.
Prejudice. You mean against gay people?
Yeah.
But that seems odd if her fingerprint was found at the scene of a gay man's murder.
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Mickey's sister,
Mm-hmm.
in an interview with the Salt Lake Tribune,
Mm-hmm.
she insisted that Mickey was bisexual
Oh, wow.
and even had a girlfriend around the time of Tony's murder.
So was she part of the LGBTQ plus community, or was she prejudiced against it?
Right.
It's hard to reconcile those two things.
It definitely adds to the mystery surrounding her.
Yeah.
And it gets even more complicated when we learn about her possible connection to Joseph Paul Franklin,
Who's that?
a white supremacist serial killer who terrorized the country in the late 70s and early 80s.
Hold on. A serial killer.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about something else entirely.
Right?
So what's the connection between Mickey Henson and this Joseph Paul Franklin?
Well, while there's no concrete evidence linking them directly to any of Franklin's crimes,
Okay.
it's known that they crossed paths at some point.
I see.
And they might have even spent some time together in the same social circles.
Wow.
And you have to remember, Franklin targeted Black people and Jewish people in his killing spree.
So we have this troubled young woman,
Yeah.
possibly with a history of prejudice against the very community Tony was a part of.
Right.
And she knew a serial killer who targeted minorities,
Exact.
and her fingerprint is the only one found at the crime scene.
It's like pieces of a puzzle starting to fit together.
But there's still some gaps.
Yeah, and one of those gaps is this really unsettling detail.
What's that?
This cryptic statement that Mickey made to a friend years later.
Okay.
While on her deathbed, Mickey reportedly blurted out, "I did something really, really, really bad."
Wow.
But she refused to elaborate.
Oh my gosh. It sounds like she was on the verge of confessing to something, but took it to the grave with her.
Yeah, it leaves us with this big question.
Hmm.
Was she talking about Tony's murder?
Right. Could this troubled woman with a checkered past
Right.
and a connection to a notorious serial killer have been involved in Tony's death?
It's possible.
And if so, why? What would her motives have been?
Right. Was it a robbery gone wrong,
Mm-hmm.
a hate crime, or something else entirely?
Yeah. It's so frustrating,
Oh,
to be so close to a potential answer
I know.
and then have it just slip away like that.
Like it was right there
Yeah.
and then gone.
But even if Mickey Henson's deathbed confession was related to Tony's murder,
Right.
it still doesn't explain everything.
That's true.
What about the missing murder weapon?
Yeah, that's another piece of the puzzle that's missing.
Yeah.
So the Salt Lake City Police Department,
Mm-hmm.
they claim that the butcher knife that was found at the scene was lost.
Really?
Yeah.
By who?
By the university lab where it was sent for analysis.
Back in the 70s.
Yeah, back in the 70s.
Oh, wow.
However, the lab director refuted that claim.
What?
Yeah, he said that they never even handled physical evidence.
Oh, my God.
Just toxicology samples.
So wait, the official story from the police is that a key piece of evidence, like the murder weapon, was just lost?
Yeah, basically.
That seems incredibly negligent,
Right.
especially in a case as complex and sensitive as this.
It definitely raises some concerns about how thorough and, how much integrity was in that investigation.
Yeah, and it gets even more unsettling when you think about the fact that crucial evidence is missing from the cases of two other gay individuals who were murdered around the same time as Tony.
Exactly.
So you're talking about Doug Coleman, the man we mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
and then Mona, whose case we haven't really talked about yet.
Exactly, those three.
3 members of the LGBTQ plus community,
Right.
all murdered within a relatively short time frame.
Yeah, and key evidence is missing from each of their cases.
It's hard to dismiss that as just a coincidence.
It really makes you wonder if there was some kind of pattern of negligence.
Right.
Or even a deliberate attempt to cover something up.
Yeah, if these were just isolated incidents, that would be one thing. But 3 cases with missing evidence,
Yeah.
that seems like more than just a series of unfortunate oversights.
Definitely a disturbing possibility.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the Salt Lake City Police Department has been really tight-lipped about these discrepancies,
Yeah.
refusing to really cooperate with journalists and researchers who've tried to dig deeper into these cases.
And it's important to remember that Tony's story
Right.
and the stories of Doug and Mona,
Yeah.
they represent a much broader issue.
What's that?
The vulnerability of marginalized communities.
Right.
Especially in the face of potential police misconduct or indifference.
Yeah, their cases really highlight the importance of accountability and transparency,
Totally.
especially when it comes to law enforcement.
For sure.
Absolutely. We can't let these cases just fade into obscurity.
No.
These are real people with lives and dreams and ambitions
Yeah.
that were all cut short.
Yeah, they deserve justice.
Yeah, and their families deserve answers.
Definitely.
What do you think our listeners should take away from this deep dive?
Well, I think there are a few key takeaways.
Okay.
First, we need to be aware of the historical context.
Mhm.
The late 70s were a time of huge social change.
Yeah.
And the LGBTQ plus community was fighting for their basic rights and recognition.
Right.
And Tony's story reminds us of the courage it took to live openly and challenge the status quo.
During that era.
Exactly. And his murder, along with the deaths of Doug and Mona,
Yeah.
they underscore the very real dangers they faced.
Yeah, for sure.
Second, I think we have to acknowledge the possibility of systemic bias in law enforcement.
Right.
The missing evidence, the lack of transparency, that dismissive attitude toward the concerns of the LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah.
Those are all red flags.
That can't be ignored.
Exactly.
What can we do? How can we ensure that cases like Tony's don't get swept under the rug?
Well, we have to keep asking questions.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we have to demand accountability.
Yeah.
And we have to support organizations that are advocating for justice and police reform.
Absolutely.
Every voice matters in this fight.
Very well said. Tony's case, like so many others, remains a stark reminder that the pursuit of justice is an ongoing process.
Yeah, it is.
And we all have a role to play in ensuring that no one is forgotten or denied the justice they deserve.
And if any of our listeners have any information about Tony's case,
Yeah.
no matter how small or insignificant it seems,
Right.
please contact the Salt Lake City Police Department.
Even the smallest detail could help solve this puzzle.
Yeah, that's right.
And if you found this deep dive into Tony Adams' case compelling,
Yeah.
don't forget to subscribe to The Deep Dive
That's right.
for more thought-provoking explorations of fascinating topics and unsolved mysteries.
We'll keep digging for answers.
And we invite you to join us on that journey.